putting out a figure with its own prime directive. Here's your look at the NECA Toys Robocop Ultimate Robocop. Part man, part machine, all cop. For the 35th anniversary of the cult classic movie Robocop in 2022, the crime fighter from the future Detroit gets an ultimate treatment from NECA, battle criminals and rogue enforcement droids alike, with an array of accessories including data spike fist, Auto 9 pistol that fits into a hidden spring-loaded leg holster, Cobra assault cannon, attachable muzzle blast effect, and additional interchangeable head with the likeness of Peter Weller. This 7-inch scale figure features an upgraded deco and digital printing. Hoping I can actually serve the public trust, as it's certainly one of my own prime directives, we're going to get a closer look at the brand new Ultimate Robocop, and I'm going to give you my honest opinion as to whether it's worth the upgrade if you already have the earlier looked at NECA Robocops. To get, of course, things all underway, let's grab the tape measure first, just to see how tall Ultimate Robocop stands, and we'll also bring in some Robocops for comparisons in a second. Robocop stands, in this case, 6.5 inches in height, or the figure's 16 centimeters tall. I guess we'll get the main point out of the way first. Is this a Robocop that's worth picking up if you already have the other Robocops? Well, I did want to bring in the original ones so you guys can see the difference, at least in the paint. While at least in this case, the molds are going to be identical to one another. It doesn't look like they do change anything. Although, looking at the helmets might have been slightly tweaked. Other than that, though, you can see one thing that's been added to the newer one is a new coat of paint, adding again those darker airbrushed purples and the blues that were really found commonly in the original Robocop armor. It's now here present on the new Robocop figures from NECA Toys. Now again, the one here to the left is the original non-spring holstered Robocop. Luckily, though, for the new Ultimate Robocop, they did include the spring holster, which would be a closer than proximity to this one right here. Now again, when you see the bookends on both the sides, how kind of washed out, matte finish the original Robocops would have been, and how now the new shinier ones come out a lot better. Here's also what he looks like with the Jetpack Robocop, which for me, at least on my collection shelf, serves as a stand-in for Robocop 2, just because, again, it's got a lot more of that blue. And another Robocop we can also bring in. Well, you got a lot of Robocops. Here's the other Robocop, by the way, that came included with the actual chair. Not one that I usually display with the chair. I tend to display a clean version of Robocop using the unhelmeted Murphy head sculpt that came included with the battle damage version of Robocop that also makes an reappearance here again with the new Ultimate Robocop that we're about to have a look at. I realized I probably just said Robocop like 100,000 times. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Looking, though, at the accessories that come included with this new release of Robo, the figure, first of all, comes included with the Auto 9. The Auto 9 looks stock as the same molded one that we got already before released. This looks like it doesn't have necessarily any paint, but it is still a nicely molded plastic version of the Auto 9 that he carries and wields not only in his hand, but also in the spring-holstered leg located on the side of the figure's body. For obvious reasons, you can fit this into one of Robo's hands. This is the hand on the side here that's going to hold the Auto 9. And because, again, he does have the articulation both in his elbows and in his shoulders, and you can also twist the arms slightly, you can get Robocop actually displayed with the Auto 9. Now, again, with this one, unlike the Battle Damage one that came included with the chair, that one would have been a re-release of the original Battle Damage Robocop and would not have had the spring-holstered leg. This one does have the spring-holstered leg, and it works the same way as the one that we got before. So I'm just going to, again, bring in the Robocop. So first of all, again, you can see quite a difference in paint between the two. I love the use of the additional purples and now the blues they've added to this. It does really, when you look at them compared, it does make like the earlier Robocop really look a little faded, doesn't it? But the spring-holstered leg looks like it's going to be identical between the two shared molds. And then again, if you want just to activate the spring-holstered leg, there's a little button here on the back. Just press this, and when you depress it, what it ends up doing is it springs out. So you can see there's actually two springs on the inside here that then pops out the holster. You can then take your Auto 9 and you can slide this in. Although it's not the easiest thing to slide in, they've never really been easy things to slide and holster into Robo's leg. I find sometimes it helps if you just take your thumb and kind of guide it on the one side, the inside of his thigh, and then from there you sort of just slide it in, holster it in. It's supposed to, for all intents and purposes, I think, clip on. There's a little peg on the inside. But sort of the way I've got it right now, it does a good enough job of keeping the Auto 9 in place. The thing about the spring holster is to accommodate, of course, the springs. It's not 100% movie accurate. The holster, in fact, should actually be a little bit more dead center in the middle of his thigh, but again, to accommodate that gimmick, which I'm actually glad to see that they brought this back. I don't mind the fact that the Auto9's resulting of that has to sit a little further forward on the figure's leg. Then again, we can go ahead, and I guess, you know what we can do too, is just fit this in as best again we can. They're not always going to be sitting the best way. I found actually like the original Robocops with its spring holstered leg seem to hold the Auto9 just a little bit better. Just kind of line things up as, again, best we can get it there. There we go. Once it's in there, you can go ahead then and close up the leg. There's enough of a cavity on the back of it that the handle, where normally you would think that that would jam, actually does a fine enough job at actually closing up the holster. I just want to make sure, though, I've got it all the way in there, because again, like the holstered, I want to just make sure everything's completely in there. And the one thing, of course, you will not want to risk breaking is obviously the spring on the inside. I don't think I've actually have the Auto9 completely all the way in there. Again, you just kind of line everything up. Certainly chat amongst yourselves while I'm just doing this. And again, we can just close up the leg. I don't think I have it all the way in, but it does, for all intents and purposes, allow the leg to actually hold and holster the Auto9 on the inside of it. Just going to want to make sure I've got that a little bit lined up. But though in the meantime, we'll just kind of close things back up. While you're also as well closing up the leg, it helps to actually push the front of the leg and then just sort of guide the side of the leg around like that, and it'll snap back into place. I feel bad I didn't get the Auto9 completely in there, but it does fit in there. I just didn't do the greatest of job in that part of the review. As for the rest of the things that come included with the figure also comes included with this data link spike. The spike in this case is the one thing that actually gets painted silver, while all the rest of the hand, as you can see here, is just straightly molded in the black plastic. We can take the hand, the arm at least I would say, and just pop this off. Just have to wiggle it back and forth, although it's really hard, there we go, to detach it sometimes. If you're having any bit of difficult time, simply use the hairdryer trick. You can also submerge it in hot water. And then we're just going to twist the data spike link hand, there you go, onto the forearm of Robocop. It's not something I'm going to tend to do with this specific version of the figure, simply just because, again, with the battle damage version, that's usually the way I'm going to be displaying the figure, especially now that we have ourselves a Peter Weller unmasked head sculpt. Yes, yes, yes. That's the way I've got him actually displayed on the shelf. But it's always nice to have a data link spike included with your figure. You never know when you need to access something from OCP or access something from a police department, or why not just puncture the jugular there on Clarence Boddicker. Careful though when you are removing it, obviously, because the data link spike is just a thinner bit of plastic. Again, we're just going to wiggle it back and forth. There we go. That was like a nice satisfying as we remove these figures' arms. The other thing the figure also comes included with as well, will involve me bringing back in the Auto9 in a second. The figure also comes included with the Cobra Assault Rifle. I like it. As you can see, it does have, again, the little swing out stock, although if you're not too careful, I just popped one and went, boom, just across over to the floor. I'm going to have to grab that a little bit later. But this actually just plugs into place. The plugs themselves, though, are, again, very, very tight. So when you are swinging out this, for example, careful that you don't, what I just did, hit it across the room. It doesn't have the removable clip. It's not something that comes off, but there's a little bit of paint that they've actually added to the top there of the scope. You can actually see it right there. A very destructive weapon. Of course, Boddicker's gang actually get a whole handful of these that they start to use to blow up the city streets of Detroit. Robocop also uses it at the end to take out one guarding Ed 209 before he enters the inside of OCP headquarters. Again, I'm going to have to go and retrieve that. Pew! Across the room. The one thing I also did want to hold on to this and bring back in the Auto9 in a second is also does come included with a blast effect. Of course, simulating it actually being fired off. I'm going to just bring back in the Auto9, and what you can do is just line everything up here. And this just fits in for all in a perfect world. There we go. It just plugs onto the end of it, and it looks like he's actually firing off a few rounds. A few rounds. That's being a little generous. This does actually as well, for all intents and purposes, plug onto the end of the Cobra Assault Rifle. Although it's not really intended to go on there, but just to show you that it does fit onto the end of the nozzle if you wanted to use that as well. Kind of like that. I like that. And again, it's using just a translucent, sort of a yellowish clear plastic, and they've added a little bit of frosting on there as well. Always nice to get stuff like that. The last thing the figure also comes included with, of course, is the unhelmeted Murphy head sculpt, which would not have been available when you had picked up the original Robocop figures. Head sculpt is actually really quite good on this one. It does tend to look a little pasty, a little on the more jaundiced side. This, by the way, the one I was talking this is the one that came included with the damaged seat version of Robocop. you can see that they are exactly the same head sculpt. Although, strangely enough, this one here looks like it almost has a slightly smaller chin. I'm sure it's probably just my eyes playing tricks on me. The coloring, I also have to think, too, is a little bit better on this one than the one that we got with the damaged version. But again, mileage may vary. These, I would imagine, are all hand-painted, so probably even machine-painted. But you can see, like, there's the little bullet entry wound there on the top of his head. Nice-looking head sculpts, though. To change the head on Robocop, I guess it would probably help to first show you guys what the defaulted head sculpt looks like. That's a fine-looking head sculpt on Robo. And also, too, I guess while we're also on the topic of comparing Robocops as we did before, I just want to, again, bring in the two Robocops. This one does seem like it's a slightly smaller head, again, when you're comparing the two heads, especially when you see it from the side. It does look like he takes up a little less real estate space than the original Robo we looked at before. Paint those considerably better. And again, if you had maybe had this figure before, or any of the other Robos that NECA had released in the years, I still think there's a lot of mileage to be made from getting this figure again, because again, like, there's a lot more of that additional purple that wasn't there before. A little bit of the blues are also added there as well. Mostly it's more purples than the blues. I feel like they almost could have even added even a darker shading of that purple and the blue. Again, there's more purple than there is the actual blue, but it does shine a lot nicer than the original Robocop figures. Anyways, though, here's what the defaulted head sculpt looks like. You can see the printing there on the side of his helmet. Where his chin guard goes, nobody really ever knows. They try to explain it a little bit later in the standalone Robocop miniseries. I think Prime Directive was one that actually described the chin guard. At one point, the chin guard just disappears on his face. It just kind of like retracts itself on his face. And another time, which I thought even looked more awkward, they actually kept the chin guard actually on his face. And it looks so strange to see an unhelmeted face Robocop with still the chin guard underneath. It's just one of those things. I don't mind not getting an explanation as to what happens with it. It just looks better to have it with the helmet. It looks honestly better to have it without when the helmet's off. Anyways, to change the head, you're just going to grab and hold onto the torso. Just wiggle that off the ball joint. Then take the head that comes included with the figure. And again, it's going to be obviously using the same ball joint between the two figures. Like so, this Murphy head sculpt just will happen to be the exact same ball joint at the bottom of this one. Now, with this one, obviously, you're going to be getting a brand new portrait, a likeness there of Peter Weller. And again, it looks really good. The detailing that they've added to the circuitry there on the side, not to mention what's left on the back of his head. I mean, obviously, he's just stretched out skin, really, what's left of the human element of him. He had at one point an arm, but they wanted to do away with that altogether, which was brought back nicely in the Robocop remake. I know a lot of people don't really like the Robocop remake. But that's a good-looking Robocop, though. For me, at least, I'm going to display him, I think, more with the helmet version. But it's always nice to get options available. Certainly when it comes to the rest of the figure's body, other than already mentioned the shinier plastic that they've used here for Robocop, adding again the nicer purples there on the front of his torso, makes some appearances there on the sides of his arm. There's a little bit of the blue, but it's mostly more purple. The plastic also seems shinier here on his lower torso and as well his arms. Again, the detailing on the figure is going to be exactly the same as the ones we looked at before. They haven't done nothing necessarily to tweak the figure from the already one we looked at before. He does have still, again, the pistons there on the backs of his feet. So when you are moving the feet back and forth, the pistons will, like pistons do, move in and out, as you can see right there. Yeah, overall, it's a nice looking Robocop. Again, I can only imagine how many times I've actually said the character's name over the course of this review. I hope nobody was turning this into a drinking game. But again, just to bring back in the original one, I do think there's definitely a warranted reason to go out and pick up this one if you already have this guy in your collection shelf. For the articulation here on the now Ultimate Robocop, the head's going to be on a ball joint. So yeah, it's rotating all the way around. It looks up, it looks down, and it looks also back and forth. If I was to say in this scenario, use this head sculpt, it would work exactly the same way. All the same articulation. Upper torso is on a ball joint. Lower torso is on a mild swivel. The arms do rotate all the way around. Rotate all the way around. There's a hinge joint also that allows those arms to kind of come out only by about 45 degrees. There's also a hinge joint on the shoulders or in the elbow area. And the hands also do rotate all the way around. Legs do hinge out on a slightly small ball joint, a little hinge joint on the inside. So you're not going to be able to do a full splits on Robocop. But I'm sure if you were to ask Peter Weller, he'd probably tell you the exact same. The character actor could barely move when he was inside the suit. But the legs do move forward and back a little bit more than what actually Peter Weller would be able to do. It's a mild swivel also at the top of the thigh. Single hinge only on the knee. And then when it comes to the feet, they move up and down, allowing those pistons to do their thing. Mild pivot up and down on the feet, and there is no toe articulation. But there is at least peg holes on the undersides of Robocop's feet. I'm just going to go ahead and just pop the head off right now. I'm going to go back to the way we started things at the beginning of this review. There we go. And as we put down Robocop, short of having a little more of the struggle to get actually the Auto 9 holstered into his leg, I'm probably going to just be displaying it in his hand anyways. Just to, again, bring back in those earlier looked at Robocops. Just want to turn him to the side to realize this was the spring holstered leg. This was the original Robocop. And the whole reasoning why, of course, we're wrapping things up at the end of the review by bringing the older Robocops is to, again, hopefully sell the idea that even if you had these guys in your collection space, and even though technically, yes, NECA is just simply reusing the mold yet again, it's the cosmetic changes and, of course, the additional accessories that weren't included with the original Robos booked and on either side that I do think it's still well worth picking this guy up, even if you already have other Robos in your collection right now. And even though really I was going to be heading on over to the turntable, if anyone was curious again, because of course it's using the same Robocop body, yeah, you can use yourself the chair. We already looked at before with the battle damage version of Robocop. Something also too I want to talk about with the Robocop chair is that the backrest here actually does raise up. I don't think it was something I talked about in the review. But again, if you wanted to take yourself your new Murphy, just bring the legs out just a little bit here, bend the knees, bend the knees. Even though he really does still have the leg holster on the side, you can still bend the knees here freely on Robocop. Whether you decide for yourself, though, you wanted to use the Murphy head or not, you can still then use this Robocop and display him along with his chair. Now, you probably can already see the direction I'm going to be going with this. This Robocop is so good, in fact, even though I already have the other ones in my collection space, I'm going to probably still see if I can actually venture out to get a second one of these. One to be displayed in his chair, one to be displayed loose, and maybe with the Auto 9 in his hands. Anyways, though, heading finally over to the turntable, we've got Robocop here with the Auto 9 in his hand. I got the spring holstered leg closed for right now. The spring holstered leg, like the ones we looked at before with the earlier Robos, does still have a hard time to hold the Auto 9. Eventually I did get it in there. I probably should have showed it in the review, but it does actually fit in there. You have to kind of navigate it. A little bit of wiggle space. And once you get kind of the right angle in there, the Auto 9 does actually holster on the inside of his leg, and then you can close up the thigh. I didn't, of course, show it in this review. Now, this Robocop, again, is more cosmetic changes than anything else. Mold-wise, you're pretty much going to be getting the same one that we got before and released several times already before. But I think the cosmetic changes are still enough to justify picking up this figure if you already have them before. One thing to go even further with the idea of cosmetic changes, using this mold again, I hope at some point we do get ourselves a Robocop 2 Robo, which is one of the notable traits about that Robocop design, is not that the armor changes necessarily, that his body is about still the same, but it's the fact it brings a lot more blues, as his entire body was all blue. That's one of my favorite looks for Robocop, and I hope that it's something that NECA will eventually consider doing, having now released already a Robocop battle damage version that comes with his chair, and now releasing the ultimate Robocop that has the spring holstered leg being brought back. Give us, please, a Robocop 2 NECA toys, if you can make that possible. And, of course, the wish one, the biggest one I'm wishfully hoping for, is eventually we're going to be getting ourselves a Kane Robocop 2. Is that something you guys certainly would like to see? Would you guys be interested to see a Robocop 2 blue-painted Robocop and a Kane Robocop 2? Let me know down below in the comments section. Also, this one I did pick up over on Entertainment Earth's website. To be fair, it's a figure that's been around for a bit, but I finally pulled the trigger, so to speak, on the Auto 9. Decided to actually add this one to my shopping cart. And I ordered this one, I think, about a week or so ago. They had it in stock. They shipped it right away. And being the fact that I didn't already have the chance to look at this guy here in this channel, and because I did also want to get this Robocop being had the improved paint scheme, I definitely did want to order this guy. I didn't want to say right away, but I did eventually order this guy. If you guys are interested and would like to get Robocop, if you haven't had any chance to find this guy in the wild, I know here in Canadian stores, sometimes we can luck out in our local Toys R Us stores. Toys R Us is usually the place where us Canadians go to shop for our NECA figures. Usually Toys R Us lately have been stocked pretty good with figures. I don't think they have yet the Robocop. So again, if you can't find this guy in the wild, you click the link down below in the video description. That will take you on over to Entertainment Earth's website. But what do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comment section. I guess the bigger question also to ask too, if you already have the other Robocops that you've been collecting over the years, would you still venture out to pick up this figure, even though it's really more cosmetic change than anything else? Certainly let me know. Weigh in your thoughts down below in the comment section. Also as well, if you enjoyed this video, hit it with a like. If you're loving the content, yes, that you guys are checking out here on a regular basis, and like the fact that we're finally looking at some more Robocop figures here on this channel, that yeah, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button down below and turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.